Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, I believe. My name is Julia Scott, and I am here to host our BRJA 13th of the month event for December. Go to the next slide. So just for some virtual housekeeping, keeping your video on is highly encouraged. If you are not, we understand, but we would love to see people's faces. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking, and your voice is encouraged during this conversation, particularly during this one, where we're doing a lot of reflection and discussion. So we welcome folks who participate out loud and also in the chat. There also can be times for Q&A, so if you have any questions, make sure you write those down so you're ready for them when it's time to talk. Next slide. Okay, so this is the content and recording advisory. We are recording our events that go on our YouTube page. But we also want to let you all know that considering we talk about a lot of historic and sometimes violent nature of racism in this country and how it's perpetuated on Black and non-Black people of color, an examination of history will be challenging. And so because of this, we want to provide a content warning before our workshops and public offerings such as this. And so we just want to make sure that people, for one, taking care of themselves during this process. If you need to kind of step away or get off camera, we understand. We're also encouraging you to take a moment to assess your emotional readiness to participate. So taking all those things into consideration. And here we are for December 2023. We are honoring our growth and reflecting on 2023 in the year ahead. So let's get into this, right? So normally during December, we usually we'll have a bazaar where we have Black businesses that folks can come and support. However, this year we're going to be doing some reflection. I feel like 2023 has been a very interesting year, I know, for myself and from other folks in my community that I've spoken to. And so I think this is an opportunity to truly sit with other people who are in the work, who are trying and striving to be better at anti-racism and anti-oppression, and to really honor our own growth, what we've learned this year, and also do a little bit more reflection. So we're going to go to the next slide. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with Grace Lee Boggs, but she was an amazing activist, and she said, "There were times when expanding our imaginations is what is required. The radical movement has overemphasized the role of activism and underestimated the role of reflection." So I had actually learned about this quote sometime earlier this year or late last year. I was working on a school project around essentially radical education and social justice education through reading books. And this quote really stuck out to me in a documentary because a lot of the time, I think that people believe that fighting racism and oppression is just about a few things. It can be, of course, protesting when things, happen, being online and making posts. It is, talking to your friends or in some cases debating friends or folks that you see online or people. But reflection is sometimes not included. And a lot of this work is not just about the world that we live in and how we are, trying to change it, but what is our actual growth? What is our own journey in this work? And so reflecting on that, I think, allows us to deepen our understanding of ourselves, where we are in anti-racism and anti-oppression, as well as what needs to change. How can we actually make changes more sustainable and more inclusive of people? So reflection is important. We know it's important in education, and that is no different when we're talking about anti-racism and anti-oppression education and learning. So I want to go to the next slide for me, please. Take some time on why this topic is important. So BRJA, we also obviously know that learning and implementing ARAO principles and practices are essential to dismantling the systems that are harming all of us. We talk about racism and other systems of oppression. We know that having this lens, using this framework is important for that. However, we also recognize that in times where these issues are not just like going away, but if anything, backlash is happening, right? We've seen over the past year anti-DEI, like, stuff coming up, or taking anti-racism discussions out of schools, changing of history. In Florida, we're talking about slaves actually benefiting or learning something from slavery. We've seen all of that happening, and it can be easy, I think, to just get involved. And so that involvement can look like protesting and doing stuff online and talking with people. But with everything that's going on around us, sometimes reflection can feel like a waste of time because we feel like we should be out there doing something, we should be saying something. And what I have found from my own learning and this experience is just that reflection allows me to sit with myself and explore and ask myself hard questions, to celebrate myself, what I have learned, how I've grown. And so it's not a waste of time. It's actually a part of the work. So on our anti-racist, anti-oppressive journeys, I think it's important for us to use this tool of reflection to examine what we've done, to deepen our understanding, and plan how we want to move forward. What do we do differently for tomorrow to have a bigger impact later on? So I have a series of questions I want to have with the audience that we have here today. I'm going to ask, maybe if we can like make it more like for everyone to be included on screen, so we can have these conversations and ask these questions. All right, next slide. So let's start. I want to know, and this is this, I think maybe I can kind of like tell you some mini storytelling during this process. Why is anti-racism and anti-oppression work important to you? I asked this question because I know a lot of people are doing or saying they're doing this work nowadays. But what actually brought you to the work? Why is it important? Why is it important to who you are as a person? Why is it important that you stay involved in the work? So I know for myself, I grew up born and raised in Baltimore, and my parents are very proud Black people, and they taught me about oppression. Obviously, as you get older, you recognize how ingrained these things are. And the work that I do and who I consider myself to be, being, I think, anti-oppressive is important to who I am, wanting better for not just my community, but for everyone. And I've been on this journey of learning what that looks like or what that could look like. And so it's important to me because I want not just for myself to be healthy, but for those around me to be healthy. And I know that the system that we currently have is not a system where that is, really possible. So I would love to hear from some other folks about why ARAO work is important to you, and what brought you to it. The floor is open.
Go next.
Okay.
Michelle Dewberry. I would say that for me, what brought me to this work, as you were talking, Julia, I was kind of thinking back and reflecting, and I know that for me, I feel like as a mother of two Black sons, I think Trayvon Martin was a wake-up call. Mike Brown was a wake-up call. And I just remember watching, people take to the streets and wishing that I could do it. And at the time, my kids were little, and feeling like, what is my place? What is my thing that I'm going to be doing to contribute? Because as a mom of two Black boys, I felt like, how can I love my children and protect my children and not be doing everything I can possibly possibly be doing to make their lives better, to make the future better for them. And I think that because the effects of the effects of anti-Blackness can mean death for Black people in
Mhm.
so many different spheres of our society. That's why for me the work feels so important, because we're not just talking about the things that, and racism makes us feel bad, right? Yes, that is true. But in some instances, it literally means death.
Yeah,
So that's why this work is important to me.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Dottie, do you want to go next or should I?
I can go next.
Awesome.
Well, I was trying to decide whether to start from the very beginning of why it's important or go into more recent times. So just a tiny little lens into the beginning. I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, which at that time was about 50% white and 50% Black. And I grew up surrounded by the most blatant, hateful kind of language against Black people imaginable, except for in my family. And my parents were not, they had, of course, never heard of ARAO and didn't have the kind of depth of education around racial history and analysis of the kinds of things that I've had the privilege of participating in. But they actively taught us that what we were hearing from our neighbors and our friends in school and all those places was really, really wrong. And this just hit me a few years ago of a big difference. It wasn't just that they said those things, because a lot of white people who've been in workshops with BRJA have talked about being taught that it was wrong to say hateful things about anybody of any race. But an important thing that happened for me and my brother and sister growing up was that our parents actually told us about the history of the racial violence against Black people in East St. Louis.
Mm.
And in all the years that I've been doing work with BRJA and working with white people and asking about their early messages about race, I've never heard one other white person say that they were taught about the racial violence that happened in their town or their city. That was, when that finally hit me, it was such a realization of how different things could have been if white people had told the truth instead of just saying, oh, you shouldn't say those racist things, you shouldn't use those words. So that's kind of a fast forward to then my next major reason was, well, I could talk about my son, but I'm not going to. But he is a major reason. But working with the National Peace Organization and being involved with other social justice kinds of organizations over the years of my adult life, the more I got into learning about racial history, going to a workshop series that was taught by Dr. Margot Okazawa Ray, getting deeper and deeper into understanding the real roots in this country of how racism operates, and seeing within those mainly white-led organizations the more subtle ways that racism operated and the resistance that was there because everyone's self-identity was, oh, I am not racist. So even talking about it was very, very difficult.
Mm,
And that was what really pushed me to go from the original workshops to training of trainers and
mhm.
getting really involved in how to do this work in a way that could unmask all those different ways in which racism manifests itself in our culture.
Thank you for sharing. That was like a lot. That's a really important, I think it's important that you brought up the fact that not a lot of people talked about or discussed them learning about the violent history of it. I think that we have a very I don't know, like obviously, but yeah, it's wrong to do. Like it's just not the right thing to do. But like, why is it not the right thing to do? Like, what does it lead to when that happens? And I wonder, yeah, if maybe if we were a lot more honest in this country around those topics, where would we be? Who knows? But you know, somebody's getting the information, just not all, not just not everybody. So thank you for sharing that, Dottie. I appreciate it.
And I'm trying to choose my words carefully. Oh shoot, forget it. It seems as if oftentimes when we talk about people not knowing, and especially white people not knowing, it's almost like it's an oversight. We didn't know
Right.
that we should talk about it. We didn't know that we could talk about it. As opposed to it's a conscious decision not to talk about it.
Right.
It's a conscious decision to disappear it. And it's not only personal, individual, community decisions, it's policy decisions.
Right.
It is, a culture of our country decision. It is our wanting the history of this country or the way that we say it to be one from the perspective of whiteness decision. So it is in regardless of the reason is insidious because it is a conscious choice. We saw it way back when, we see it now, the way that it is going back to the way that it was because of this white lash. And this is conscious too. So want to say that, also want to just like give love and respect to Dottie, who introduced me to Margot Okazawa Ray, where I studied with her too, and actually was part of her first class of training people of color, just people of color without white people there. And it was a transformative experience. And some of those people remain in our networks today, 30 years later. And so that community and being a part of that community has been instrumental in my life. But to get to the question that you posed, Julia, the short answer for the reason that I do this work is because I am a Black woman with a Black family in a racist, white supremacist, anti-Black country. And being a Black woman with a Black family in a racist, white supremacist, anti-Black country puts me and my family at risk.
Yep.
I want to bring up, there still is not a any kind of hate resolution, law, discussion about anti-Blackness. Right? So this is the country in which we live, that we can be in danger or even feel that we're in danger. And there's no response to our feeling that we're in a hostile environment or our actually being in a hostile environment. I'm a Black woman in America with a Black family in America that is racist, white supremacist, anti-Black. That's the short answer. The slightly longer answer is because I'm a student of US history, right? I am a student of US mythology and the difference between the real history and the mythology that we push on everybody. I come from generations of lived experiences that has been transmitted down, shared with us. So our history has not been hidden. I am an observer of those things that have happened and that I have heard. And also I am a legacy of all of those things, because it is because of those people who've come before that I can hold the privilege that I hold now in doing this work without getting my head bashed in or being blinded or killed or lynched the way that other people were. And that legacy piece, that piece of understanding upon whose shoulders I stand, weighs very heavily on me. It always has. How dare I not do anything at all when I stand on the shoulders of those who've done so much with so less? And finally, I do this work because I really believe in service. I really believe that my service is the rent that I pay in order to be here. I believe that we are all a bridge for those generations that come after us, and that those that come after us, we provide that legacy to them. So what legacy will it be that we provide? You all know I have a 12-year-old niece. You know, this work became a lot more urgent for me, as if it weren't urgent enough, because it was. It became a lot more urgent to me with the birth of my niece. And every time I look at her face or hear her voice or think about her, I feel that renewed sense of urgency. And also I do it because I believe in justice. I believe in racial justice, and this country has a whole lot to answer for, right? And there should be some level of accountability. This country always pushes a narrative of personal accountability. There's got to be a level of societal accountability for the atrocities that have happened and continue to happen here. We pay attention, lots of attention, to what's going on overseas. We get outraged about it. I wish that we had half, a fourth, a third of that outrage for what continues to happen here. And finally, you know, ARAO is how I live the faith that I hold, that faith which says that we are all each other's keeper, right? That whatever you do to the least of us, you're doing for me. And it is that faith, that sense of wanting justice, that understanding that I am legacy, the understanding of the type of country that I live in. It is all of those things that keep me working in ARAO, as well as the wonderful community that, you know, that I am surrounded by, that helps me grow, that holds up a mirror to me so that I see the ways in which I still need to grow. That level of accountability, and accountability with love, means everything.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We can now end because Adar once again. But no, I mean, I think that's I mean, all of that. Thank you. I think it is absolutely, it's the legacy of it. I love that you brought up faith. And you know, what we're taught is one thing, and how we actually act those things out. You know, I tell people, you know, it's the difference between theory and practice, right? And so what does it mean to practice these things, to actually say, oh, well, it's bad to do that, it's bad to be racist. And then when people are saying, oh yeah, you know, it's in our policy, it's in our policing, it's in our education, then it's like, that means that we have a duty to actually discuss it and to do something about it, not just to like rest on our laurels. But I think, you know, that's not really what a lot of us do, like most of us do. And so I think that talking about that is very helpful. Thank you. Rebecca, did you want to go before we go to our next kind of like questions or group of questions?
Sure, I can jump in now. When I'm thinking about this question, I was thinking about a couple of different things. And one of them is that really, since being a kid, I've always felt a need to look at the world's brokenness and figure out ways of repairing that. And so there's that sort of like thread. However, because I was raised in a white family that was pretty much purporting to follow sort of a colorblind philosophy, the messages I got about how the world was broken and why the world was broken and what kind of solutions we needed to have were very incomplete. And so the messages that I got about how racism operated in the United States were very incomplete. And it was really when I had kids of my own and was trying to figure out how to explain to them what was going on in the world and realized that I did not have the language to do that, that sort of led me to a search for answers, and for other ways of explaining it. And as I learned more about the history of the country, as I learned more about an anti-racism, anti-oppression analysis, it answered so many questions for me about the nature of the way that our world and specifically our country is broken through racism and how it operates, through oppression and how it operates, which then led to clearer ideas about how we begin to make that repair, how we begin to move towards not just wholeness, but justice, as Adar was saying. And so that's I guess the short answer of why this work is important to me, is that it makes sense. I don't see another way based on what I know about how the world, how our country operates to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you have brought up, like, like kind of how do we fix the issue? And a lot of it is, I kind of said in the intro, a lot of it is like through fixing ourselves. It's like through evaluating ourselves and developing a relationship with who we actually are as people and how we move in the world and how the world engages with us as we move through it, right? So I think that you notice the problem, like, well, they're saying that it's this, and then it's like, well, we're not going to fix that though. It's like, well, then do we actually want to fix the problem? Who knows? But yes, thank you. I'm going to go to the next slide. We talked a little bit about obviously why we're doing this work, but I also want us to think about, what did you discover about yourself this year? What did you learn about yourself this year, truly? Whether it be in this work or just in general. Like, I've learned who I am as a student. I know who I am as like a worker, but what did I learn about Julia outside of those parts? And as someone who was doing ARAO work, I've learned continuously that there's so much more for me to know. Literally, I was having a conversation with some folks and someone said something and I was like, I had this theory and I was reading all about all this stuff. And like they pushed me on something. I was like, wow, like let me sit and pause with that. Like actually opening myself up to the things that I don't know. So I discovered how much more I have to learn. I think I've discovered more about who I am when I'm in a learning space. I'm someone I can be very insular and kind of in my head, and that I need to have more community when I'm in my learning spaces, so I can be challenged and work through things. So I've discovered more about like how I learn and what I want to learn. And that's been a beautiful discovery for myself this year, and how to take care of myself through all of that. It's been a process, but I do want people to think about, what did you discover about yourself this year? What was something that was like, oh, wow. When you think about it now, you're like, wow, Julia of 2022 is different, because 2023 happened, and this is what I discovered about myself. Who wants to go?
I'll go. I've really been this year last year too, but this year especially, I've been working harder to divest myself of this workaholic mindset, and part of it is I really love what I do. Doing anti-racism, anti-oppression work is hard, but it is really necessary. And I feel privileged to be able to do it. And because of that, I take like the huge bite out of the apple. And I realized that in most of my adult working life, I have just run so hard that usually this time of year I am exhausted to bed rest. And my colleagues, Rebecca, Anthony, Dana, have been gently and not so gently, like really laying the law down, urging me to look another way. My colleague, and dear friend Marcella, has been for years and years, she and Dottie been saying, oh, come on now. And I have never quite been able to do that. And part of it has been because I really love what I do. And we do what we love, right? Because that makes us feel good and the whole service piece and stuff. But I also connect it to the piece of it being about the ways in which society defines worth, our worth. The messages that we receive about not being lazy, the messages that we receive about pushing through, regardless of, what is happening with you, you just need to suck it up and push through. And I really am dissecting even more and being more conscious of all the ways in which I have, for my adult life, inculcated those messages and also measured success, if you will, my working hard, my contributing to my team, the work, all of that, how I used my being able to push, as opposed to, nope, I'm doing good work, even when I have to take several seats. I still am how you started us off, Julia, I still am reflecting, and not everything has to be the 100% push in the doing. There are other ways. Rest is the other side of work, and rest is just as important a component in our being of worth, value, being able to continue to do what we do as the hard charge is. So that is something that in 2023, I've really, really been sitting with and trying to change my habits and patterns.
Wow. That's a big one too, because yeah, I'm still
For
learning.
me, I mean, for me, the struggle is real. The struggle is real, and I know that I cannot do this by myself. I am so grateful to have people around me who really are gathering me in, because I so need that. And people have been very generous in offering their support on that journey.
It is a journey, because Lord knows. Absolutely. Thank you for, I was writing some things down. Thank you for that, because that was actually helpful for me. Did anybody else want to share with that question? What have you discovered about yourself this year?
Well, I'll follow up from Adar because it's very, very related in so many ways. I guess the overarching thing is just the importance of having a community that shares the same commitment to this work and the values that we keep evaluating and honing over the years and how to keep doing it. I had already learned some hard lessons about being able to pull back when necessary. When my husband went into an assisted living and then a nursing home situation where I had to be there more and more than my time. And that was like with Adar, I'm used to working a lot, and I had to learn to achieve that balance, not just for myself, but for my family. And then I learned in an even deeper way that losing someone as close as my husband and I were is a whole other level of being willing to just be honest. I don't have to be there all the time
Mm-hmm.
with everything. And a big part of my job, knowing that, is placing a lot of my focus on making sure there are others, younger especially, who will be here to carry on and to have that part of my consciousness much more in front of my mind and focusing within my community on helping that work happen.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. Yeah. Losing someone is very difficult, and grief is certainly a process. But it's certainly one of the things in life that teaches you, I think, if you allow it to, because sometimes we don't allow ourselves to. I've certainly have been someone, when my mom passed, I was not necessarily, I think even I was like, okay, this has happened. I'm really sad. I'm very angry. But I can now reflect and be like, oh wow, there I was blocking some of that too. So allowing it to teach us is very, very difficult. So certainly know that my heart goes out to you. Anyone else want to share? Discover? Okay. So the next question is technically, what have you done this year that has excited you? I think that sometimes when talking about anti-racism and oppression and all of that, obviously we can get very much into the terms, we can get into like the political and the history, but if I think that this work is about who we are as people, our personal selves, it has to, I think, permeate through all of our, kind of parts of our lives. And so things that get you excited or happy is also important to reflect on, especially as we're going to the new year. So I want you all to kind of think about what are some things you've done this year that have excited you, that have kind of like made you feel like yourself. Like, who is Julia? Who is Adar? Who is Michelle? Like, what have you done that has made you like, wow, like I love this, and that made you feel like you, excited you?
I can go.
Okay.
So I haven't actually done this thing yet, but it's coming up very soon. So a lot of you probably already know I'm going to Ghana for my on my birthday, which is the day after Christmas. And for me, it's literally, it's so much bigger than just like a trip or a vacation. I get emotional just thinking about being the first person on my mom's side of the family to ever go back to West Africa. I'm sorry. I just think about like my ancestors and how much they wanted to go home.
Mhm.
And it's very emotional for me because like I can't even imagine what they went through and what they experienced. And like I'm the first on my mom's side of the family to go back.
Yeah.
And this is huge. This is like so much bigger than me. Like I know I'm gonna lose it when I get there. It's just gonna, for me, it's just gonna be so much emotion. I feel so tied to my ancestors, and I have an altar to them. I call on them, to guide me in life. I've always felt their presence very strongly in my life. So yeah, this is like, I keep calling it a trip of a lifetime, and it really is for me. I just remember being in college and going to school with a lot of other West Africans. And for whatever reason, I was just like, I'm from Ghana. I just started telling people that I'm from Ghana. And I don't know what it was about Ghana specifically, but I just felt so connected. And then a few years ago, we got our DNA done. And I know a lot of people talk about how accurate it is, but I am 12% Ghanaian. So that is my second highest percentage. And, it's just interesting getting it done because I thought, oh, I'm going to get my DNA done and then I'm going to know where I'm from. But because of our history, I'm from almost like so many different countries in West Africa, even Central Africa, Europe. And so it's like, I remember getting it done. I'm like, I'm still not connected to one place. Like my highest percentage is only 13%, I'm still, I feel like a mutt, but like, I feel like making this trip, I think is gonna, in ways that I'm sure I'm not gonna be able to know until I get there, connect me to my ancestors in ways that are just immeasurable. So yeah, so that's the thing that I'm excited about.
All right, that is hard to follow. That is a big one. That is, for one, I'm excited to hear, excited for you and excited to hear about it. And, travel is one of my favorite things on earth. It allows me to connect with, I think, humanity in a way that I'm not always able to do, just like, in regular spaces. But that's a really beautiful thing. I'm excited for you. I'm also very jealous of you. I would also like to be going to Ghana after Christmas.
I'll bring you back something.
Listen, okay, I'll take that.
And take lots of pictures.
Yes.
Oh,
Lots
listen,
of pictures.
Definitely am. I'm gonna put a whole slideshow together, trust me.
Good, good.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to share what they are excited about from this past year? What you've done or are about to do?
I'm really excited about, this is actually a 13th that Michelle and I did together back in April. Was it April? That was on it was on white supremacy and motherhood.
Oh yeah.
And it was really connecting some things that I had been thinking about and studying for a long time, and Michelle and I had conversations about it over at least a year. And it was just really exciting to sort of see everything sort of come together and to have a chance to explore the ways that for me as a mother and as a white mother, the ways that I was seeing the messages of white supremacy showing up in the messages that I was receiving as a mother, the message, and then sort of how I was carrying out my my own mothering. And so it was this really sort of like connection of analysis and history and personal that really was exciting to do.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Dottie Adar? Excited about this?
Creating space for you, Dottie.
That's a really hard question for me to answer at this point. It's been quite a year. And excited is not a word I can apply to much of it.
Hey, that is totally okay.
Mhm, mhm. I was talking to, and I was sharing this with Dottie earlier. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying, I don't know whether 2023 is through with me, but I'm through with 2023.
Yeah, listen.
I'm ready for it to be over. There, one thing that really had me very excited this year. We've not finished work on this, but diving deeper into an ARAO analysis and really testing that against the realities and changes of the political social landscape as it relates to race, racism. That has been really exciting. And the development of a framework with my colleagues Christina Meneses and Dana Polson, where we really talked about a very specific framework that hopefully makes it easier for individuals to get into the differences between personal and socio-political racial identity, and particularly for people from ethnicities that want to substitute ethnicity for race, for their racial identity. And so really being able to sharpen that piece of work, which we will do in 2024, it really it got me excited in 2023, and I am excited for us to continue that journey with that work in 2024 because of all of these new questions around the census and racial identity and the pushback, again, where people are kind of running from whiteness, if you will, or, and saying, okay, I'm just not going to claim race. I'm going to claim an ethnicity while getting the benefits of their racial socio-political identity. So it would be nice to have an additional framework to use to help people understand the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's actually a social political question in here. I think that is very exciting work. I think to expand like how does the theory actually work? Like what does it mean in practice is something that's really fun to do. I think one of the things that wanted to celebrate, not celebrate, but like, I'm excited about this year. As you all know, I am sort of storytelling is my thing. I love stories, whether they be in books or movies or TV shows or talking with people just about stuff. And I love connecting all of those things. So I, am a huge fan of the Charles Theater. I go there just about every Sunday and I watch movies and talk with people about them. And the reason it's got me excited is not just for the storytelling itself, but being able to reflect on how much I've grown in my own analysis of like thinking about stories and how storytelling, especially in film and TV, is a part of this larger context of like, how do we think about America? How do we think about American people? How do we think about stories? I know that Adar earlier to about America's myth making essentially. And so, that is all over the films and the TV shows that we watch and engage with. And being able to like watch it is like, okay, this is entertaining. But there's also these other things that are working that are like such like interesting like to watch and then to engage with people to see what they're seeing. And like, I don't know, something about it has always really fascinated me, and I'm seeing myself just get very much like, into that. And my dad and I are watching The Crown. Well, I'm rewatching parts. He's watching it for the first time. And like watching The Crown is such a funny thing because on one end, it's like great acting, great period piece, like honestly, excellent writing. And then there's like the actual history. And it's like some of the stuff that they are saying in this is so jarring and funny in a way. It's like, wow, like this is just regular old stuff. Like I think at one point someone was talking about, oh, we don't want them to, we want to make sure that people understand the crown so they don't, they don't try to become independent. And it was like, you don't want people to be independent of like, what is this? I don't know. And so I it just makes me kind of really wonder, I think in a larger context, what the importance of storytelling, why storytelling is such an important part of culture in general, but also in shaping how we see ourselves and each other. And that is, it just kind of reminded me why I majored in English and also like why I do social work. Like that's real people, but these are people's stories that we're interacting with. We're characters. We're trying to help. And so you can decide what kind of character you want to be. And that to me is such a, I don't know, it's fascinating for me. So that's been exciting me all year. I don't know.
Julia, for the past 2 years, as my colleagues know, I have been doing like this informal study on entertainment, specifically old TV shows. And how they shaped generations in terms of their view on race, their view of patriarchy, their view of gender identity, all of this stuff, right? And like people used to look at these shows without any critical thinking around it at all. And the ways in which race was mentioned, like old John Wayne movies,
Mhm.
old TV shows such as Wagon Train. I mean, the settler, the colonialist settler mythology of America was like in those shows that these generations grew up on, listened to, it affirmed their sense of themselves in the world and in US history. And it didn't matter that it was mythology. This is the base that people got, and it formed their identity around
Mhm.
America's relationship with their racial group and all other racial groups. We don't have those types of critical conversations. Dottie, when you were talking about growing up in East St. Louis and how the racialized violence wasn't even mentioned, I bet people in those homes in East St. Louis were looking at shows like Wagon Train, Hazel, John Wayne movies, Rawhide, all of these shows that really emphasize this rugged faux individualism, this good intentions, Indians, Native Americans as savages, Black people as these lazy, shiftless bums. I mean, the messages that were imparted from those regular TV shows that were in people's, homes, living
Yes.
rooms every night, every day. Yeah, I love that you are doing that kind of intentional um, deconstruction of those entertainment mythologies and the messages that they convey.
Yeah, it's like and the thing is so funny. It reminds me when I was in college, big up to Morgan State. I was in a class and I remember we were reading Bell Hook's Feminism is for Everybody. And at that time, I was really just learning, but my professor, she really got us into the conversation because she brought up the show Martin. I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. Now, Martin, obviously, I grew up watching it. It's one of my faves. It's hilarious. But that was the first time that I really, really truly, I was like, oh wow. She was like, do you all not recognize the colorism that's in Martin,
Right,
the
right.
classism stuff that's in Martin? And I was
Right.
like, whatever, it's just a show. Now here I was majoring in English, and I was like, I didn't really even think about it like that show, like books, like themes, you see those kind of popping out, but I didn't think about it in that way with that show. And so ever since then, like it has been like, oh wow, like yeah, like she was like, for all the stuff that he loves about Gina, like that he wants a woman who can cook. Gina can't cook, like but Gina is like this kind of light skin like woman, she had like a pretty good job, and her best friend Pam, all the things that Pam does are the things that Martin is saying that he wants, but he is like talking crap about her every single episode. It's like, now yes, you can say they go back and forth, but like what is that, right? It's like, and so it was, I think, exploring that we learn from television, we learn from this, from the movies and things that we watch. And this is also why I think liberal arts education is extremely important, and it needs to be taught from people from various backgrounds to add context to these kind of like stories and understandings. But it is, when I talk to people about it, they're like, you're looking at it too deeply. I'm like, but literally, that is, somebody is putting their full self when they're writing this.
Right, right.
What are they bringing to the space?
And who's writing it? And
Mm-hmm.
what racialized tropes and stereotypes are being passed off as the ways that Black communities are, when some of those things aren't even written by Black people with any understanding. It's the white person's imagination of how Black communities interact with each other, and that is important to note
Yeah, it's like, I
too.
know who was, I think Norman Lear just passed away, and people were like
Right,
talking about
exactly.
like the work with Good Times and Black television, but also like the issues, like what did that actually mean for the Black actors? What were they thinking about some of this? There was some tension there, and I think that it's good to talk about it.
I totally agree. And in terms of what you're saying about liberal arts education, liberal arts education also teaches people how to think, not what to think, how to think.
Mm,
Taking liberal arts out of colleges, as some governors in some states are on a mission to do, saying that those things, that what should be in colleges is to teach people how to be workers, how to, those skills that they need to hold a job. And we're not even looking at the fact that this two-tier education that they are trying to codify by law and by policy in education. So we will have those Ivy League schools of leaders who are being taught to think, and then those other colleges of workers who are being taught what to do without that broader liberal arts education. So there are things that are happening like right now in real time
mhm.
that just are falling off of our radar as we continue to look at other things that are happening.
Absolutely. Yes, it is something. I am going to go to our next slide. This next quote is by Sadia Hartman. So much of the work of oppression is policing the imagination. I remember the first time I read this and really kind of sitting and reflecting on it. And it made me not just think about other people policing their imagination, but particularly me in my own work. I think it's really easy as, someone who does ARAO and does DEI stuff and tries to do stuff in the community to think that it's just this is just it, but it's the constant learning and the policing of our imaginations that has really allowed me to I think challenge myself. So to the next slide, I want to know what was an event or a situation that challenged you this year, and truly maybe has made you, maybe you're still dealing with it, you're still sitting with it, but what is it that has challenged you this year? And yeah, just sharing it. This is a challenge for me. I know for myself, obviously it is, I love the work that I do deeply. And at the same time, I think a challenge is recognizing the parameters that I have to sometimes work within, even though I might want to do more. And that's a challenge. It's hard to, I think, work in institutions and push when there's so many other things that are happening. And it's important, that's why I really do cherish and honor you all being a part of this community where I'm able to, I think, continue to push and question. But sometimes it's hard to work within an institution because you can only do but so much. And you can only talk about so much. So I think the challenge for me is figuring out, if I say that I'm someone who is anti-racist and anti-oppressive, what does that look like in a situation or a place where I can't move the way that I want to move? Am I really being true to the work, and am I being true to myself? And that is something that I think I will constantly challenge me. And at the same time, I was thinking a lot about Avis in the last couple of weeks, and when I did training, and she had taken me out to eat, and she was like, so what's gonna happen when you're tired? What are you gonna do? And so those are also things that I've just kind of been like, okay, well, what happens when I don't want to even talk about the stuff that's going on? I just want to be. Finding myself in those have been challenges that I'm still grappling with. So I think a lot of it is centered around self-care and yeah, just kind of taking a pause with stuff, but at the same time, truly questioning how do I actually move this work forward in the places that I'm in. So that's been a challenge for me this year, questioning all of that. Anybody else? sometimes the challenging part can be the hardest part.
Definitely in terms of the larger world and its impacts on our work and on me personally. It's been the Israeli-Hamas war.
Mm. Huge challenge.
And it's difficult to even begin describing what that challenge is like. It's within BRJA, it's a huge challenge.
Mm.
And it has so many different levels that require deep, deep self-examination as an organization and decision-making about how do we navigate, stay true to the ways we have done things within ARAO work, figure out how we apply those same principles within the mess that this situation has created. And in terms of my personal relationships, I have many close relationships with people who are Jewish. And in this country, those friends, I have actually been surprised at how honestly we've been able to talk. Now, that's largely because we're friends and we have a lot of the same political positions.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to a very, very close friend who has lived in Israel his entire adult life and trying to share with him the impact for people of color and particularly Black people in this country.
Mm.
The fact that he has not lived in this country in most of his adult life. It's a huge, huge chasm between our perspectives.
Yeah.
And having that conversation in the midst of a time of deep mourning in my personal life for him as well, because he was very, very close to my husband, has been one more lesson in the self-care element, because we can start the conversation. I have to stop the conversation at a certain point and say, okay, we'll pick this up next time. It's been on so many levels of a real confrontation with decision making and navigating layers of speaking the truth about race in this country and how we're impacted by the rest of the world in ways that not everyone can understand, who has not been part of the kind of work that we do within ARAO framework.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a rough one. It is a rough one. Oof, yeah. I thank you for sharing, because that is certainly a challenge. It is. We're living in a world that is rapidly changing, I think, at every moment, and it is sometimes very difficult to, I don't know, to even like parse out to hold space for people, as well as parse out, okay, like what does this mean for this type of work? Because like you want to hold people and like, you know, allow folks to grieve and to feel safe and to mourn and whatever the case may be. And then you want to also like get to these other parts of the conversation that are like, okay, these are also separate things, right? So that is a challenge. I think it's a good reminder of like how large the world is, as well as how many more lessons there are to learn to actually do this work. There's never as simple as just like we do some trainings and you learn some definitions and you have a community and you like go to stuff, but that there are real world ramifications for, you know, how we discuss this, how we can discuss this, and how people are impacted. And this is real life. So thank you for sharing that. Was there anyone else who wanted to answer about challenging?
I'm creating space for other people.
Okay. If not, it's totally okay. These are questions that you can answer or not answer, or maybe you want to reflect on them deeper in your personal time. That's totally okay.
Yeah.
So for the next one,
Wait, because I have
go
an
ahead.
answer. I just
Okay.
did not want to, if Rebecca or Michelle wanted to say something. Yeah.
You can go ahead, Adar.
Okay. So for the past week or so, I've been, or the past couple of days, it feels like a week, I've been thinking about this George Orwell quote that in a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonates for me. You know, Black facilitators in particular, Black facilitators doing this work have always been targeted because we are the easiest people to target when it comes to white rage or white ire in terms of truths being spoken, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is an extra risk that Black facilitators doing this work take. And no matter how many times I say that, I mean, people hear it, but they don't see it. They don't experience it. So it is easy for it just to be this like, you know, this thing that you throw out that you know is real, but you don't know it's real because you don't know what it looks like when it's not happening to you, right? So it's just easy to dismiss. And so continuing that revolutionary act of doing the work that you do from the analysis with an integrity and an honesty, not self-censoring because you're operating out of fear, knowing that you are unprotected and that people will be coming for you in their rage. Always checking yourself to make sure that what you are taking into any room, whether friendly or hostile, is the same level of care, the same compassion and openness, right? The same ability to give grace while speaking those historical and accurate truths, making sure that you are not jaded by the experience of that increased risk or people coming after you. And for me, in terms of events or situations that have been challenging this year, it has been that piece, because in the social and political climate that we're in, people are okay and encouraged, right? They don't have to listen to this anymore.
Yeah.
They don't have to pretend that they want to know or understand anymore. They can, I mean, there's this huge thing of a poll was just done, and the results of that poll was that white people believe that anti-whiteness is a bigger problem in the United States of America than anti-Blackness. And so much of that energy is showing up now in our society as a whole. And therefore is showing up in the sessions that we do, in the work that we do, which increases the level of risk and decreases the level of protection. So doing this work as a Black facilitator continues to be not only a revolutionary act, but an act of love. Doing the work with integrity and without your censoring yourself and without fear. I think that that's a harder thing to do. And I have seen many facilitators pulling back from that because they don't want that risk. They don't want people going to their supervisors, their dean, their, whomever, right? They don't want that backlash. And I just think about if we don't have those people, if we're not nurturing them in some way, providing them what they need to continue speaking that revolutionary act of telling the truth, then we're not going to be able to continue this work, not just in BRJA, but the country as a whole. And this is where the reflection piece comes in, because where some part of the work can be the marches in the streets and all like that, a great deal of the work is working within those institutions, where policies and laws and processes, where transformative change can happen. We've chosen that work because we know that that work is long lasting. How do we nurture those who are in that work so that they can have the longevity in the work that Dottie and I have had, right? Because we've had a community to nurture us, to fill us up with love before throwing us back in the ring. And all of those things, and with whom to grow. I that is a challenge, and that's one that I worry about for those people who are coming up in the work after us.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about. The Orwell quote that you just mentioned. It's funny, I was talking about Orwell earlier. It reminds me of a James Baldwin quote, and it was, to the victim who was able to articulate the situation of the victim has ceased to be a victim. He or she has become a threat. And
That's a word right there.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
like, I think that a lot of us, who are, as a Black person who does this work, I mean, this is not even work that I knew was even possible when I was, in college and, coming up. When I think about it, I'm like, we saw so much like movement. You saw so many people like, oh, we want to like talk about it, we want to do it. And it was like, oh, we have fatigue. And it's just like, y'all, fatigue, like, are y'all serious? And at the same time, it's like, and I tell people all the time, part of, I think, especially I think where I am in right now in my kind of journey as being like a trainer and whatnot, it's to hold space for that, to acknowledge like, yes, like it is tiring. Yes, it is emotional. It is personal. And we have got to be able to hold all of those things with us while also recognizing that like there's a lot of injustice that's happening outside. And if we really say if we are who we think we are, who we say we are, that means that, sometimes you gotta speak the truth. And I think as I get older, I just have a lot more understanding and grace for what it means to speak the truth in spaces where the truth is not actually wanted. It is hard to do. And there's been moments where I've like stepped back, and there's also been moments where I've been like, yeah, I'm just gonna test it and we're gonna push. And if anything, I always tell people like, it is because I think that we are capable of so much more. That like I think honesty is a gift. We are capable of so much more in this country, in this world, if we were truly honest with ourselves. And it makes me sad that, you know, we don't recognize that sometimes, like a lot of the time, that we would much rather sometimes be like, you know what, this is too much, people are uncomfortable, and not be like, you know what, let's test that. Why is that? Those are things that you know are definitely challenges, and yeah, things that I want to do better at in the new year, like for myself, you know.
And I love that. I love that James Baldwin quote, particularly because, you know, that is yet another measure of the effectiveness of your work.
Mm,
People would not be coming for you if what you were saying, if the analysis that you're sharing were not a threat to their deeply held privileged beliefs, right? We learn on the edge of our discomfort. And part of this work is helping people navigate through that discomfort and open up that new world that you are so sure is a better one and the one that people really want to get to. So that, yes, so that threat of that is a badge of effectiveness.
absolutely. So we're technically at 7:35. And there are actually still more questions, but I do want to ask, like, if we can go to slide 15, Rebecca. One of the things that I have seen, I think even something that I've also even just like gone through as a trainer, is trying to be like the perfect trainer, trying to be the perfect, you know, ARAO, you know, person. Like my friends were like, you know, I want to talk to you about this. And I'm like, I do not have an answer for you for that. And so, you know, perfection often gets in the way of us actually growing meaningful growth and action. And sometimes we gotta let go of things. We gotta forgive ourselves. Um, what are some things you need to forgive yourself for and leave behind in 2023 as we're making space for what's to come in 2024? And so we're going to go through that, and I just want to hear folks, you know, what do they want to work on and do in 2024? And then we'll close out. But what are some things folks need to leave behind? I am leaving behind knowing everything, which is very difficult for someone who's a self-proclaimed know-it-all. But you know what you know, and you know that's just it. I can only know but so much. I'm only as good as the knowledge that I currently have. And so the world is humongous, and it's here for me to explore and learn from. If I don't know something, it's okay. So I'm trying to forgive myself for that, for not always knowing and not always being perfect at, you know, what I do and the work and how I live my life. Like that's something that's very hard for me to move past. Anybody else?
I can go next. I think the thing that I need to leave behind is or forgive myself for is and this is sort of a tricky one because it's forgiving but also not ignoring. Is the ways that my whiteness shows up in various ways and catches me by surprise. And to sort of let go of the expectation that I'm going to get to a point in the work where that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so when that inevitably happens, that the whiteness shows up and it has impacts and it causes harm, to be able to both clearly look at the impact and harm and forgive myself so as to be able to clearly move forward in repair. Not get caught up in and paralyzed by guilt.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah.
So I'll aspirationally say that I'm leaving that behind in 2023, but I'm guessing that's something I'll be working on for a while.
You know,
We
but thank
support the
you.
aspiration.
Yes.
We claim it for you.
But also, like, thank you for sharing that. I think that that is, I think that we say that, but like, that is a very real thing, right? It's like that we're gonna make mistakes, and we're all we're all capable of it. And what does it actually mean? Like the repair, like you get embarrassed, you're kind of ashamed, all of that stuff, and it's like, at the end of the day, that doesn't have place in the work that needs to be done. So how do we get to the next part, right? Like, and so that is hard. But I applaud you for also like bringing that up, because a lot of people, including myself, need to remember that like for the new year. So thank you.
Julia, I love when you say it, because that has no place in the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh, I so believe that the guilt, the whatever, because we all are struggling and doing the best we can in those situations. And I was sharing last week, this week, I don't even know, that the explanation isn't important. The explanation of why something was done, the understanding of why something is done.
Yeah.
That's the thing that, that if we're growing, we're all trying to get to. Right? Just that understanding, what was triggered for us, what did we fall into, what trap? I mean, like, what was it? Because it is our putting our energy there instead of, oh my God, I feel so guilty, I feel this, I feel that. The understanding supports the trust. The understanding supports I may have to fall into this hole a dozen more times before, like, I really get it and don't go there again. But that we're all in it together to do that. And Dottie, this brings me back to like the roots of BRJA. And I don't know that you remember this, but I know that we were like sitting all in this circle at, I think, Sojourner Douglas College, and we were talking about this group and like at the creation, right? Our origin story. And one of the things that we were saying is, if you are committing to being a member of our learning community, then there is no divorce. There is no like you're opting out. I mean, you are in it to win it. And we've had people take leaves of absences. We've had people move away. We've had all kinds of things happen. But what we haven't had a lot of is people who are saying, I'm walking away from this. Because we are a community and we understand that we're all struggling, right, to dismantle the messages that we've received and to replace them with something healthy. So I've always appreciated about BRJA that stick to itiveness that we have had with each other, and the measures of grace that we offer each other, that we can go to our corners and, gather ourselves and then come back in ready to play. I think that has always been a strength of BRJA, and that is a thing that I'm excited about taking into 2024.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the work, folks. Like it is the messing up where you get like the lesson. And I think it says something very interesting about our culture in this country, that there's not more discussion about like failure or messing up. Like it wasn't until I think like my other boss we had done a conference and I was like extremely nervous, and she was like, you didn't like deal with a lot of failure, or like no one had a lot of discussions about failure with you, because to me failure is negative. And she's like, yeah, but it's like, that's a part of life. Like, failure is part of it. You aren't gonna know until you do it, until you fail. Like sometimes the best lesson. Now obviously we can talk about the different levels of failure, but I think that sometimes a lot of us just failing in general is like it's a fear. And so I think, like answering my earlier question, in 2024, I want to embrace a little bit more about that, about like that of
Mm.
myself and
Mhm.
being okay with it, like allowing myself to lick my wounds and then being like, okay, what am I going to do next? Because the sun will rise tomorrow. So that is something, you know, absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anybody else? Something you're leaving behind or want to leave behind? It
I'm
is.
so staring at you, Michelle.
So the thing I've been thinking about is, I guess I was trying to figure out how to word it. So I think mine is, I think sometimes I beat myself up, and I think sometimes I beat myself up about the way I am as a mom or the way I parent, the way I'm affecting my children. And I think especially growing up with someone, so my dad was a pastor, and like growing up with someone who had like um a forward facing persona, and then he was very abusive at home.
Mm.
I think about that and my kids, like I don't want to just like only just be putting on a certain face for the public or for the work I'm doing, you know, and be, you know, passionate about the work I'm doing, and but then not be giving them that same kind of love and attention and passion as well. Um, and I think I am hard on myself. I think a lot of moms are, right? I think we have a lot of mom guilt. But trying to you know, it's hard parenting teenagers. Like there is no manual. Um, we parent so much differently than our parents did, and yeah, just I think for me, letting go some of that guilt and just okay, get back in the trenches and figure it out and try some new things and um lead with love and you know and hope for the best. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's the thing I've been thinking about.
Mhm.
thank you for sharing. It's so funny. I feel that's a whole like topic. I feel like a potential 13th. Like there's been a lot of debate and discussion. I mean, I'm not a parent, but around like soft parenting, and you were just mentioning, you know, how we differ from our parents. Like, you know, like what does that look like?
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of just like a lot of conversation and tension in that conversation around what does it mean to raise you know, a child in this world. I think particularly children of color, there's so much there.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean, I think, to raise a child that's liberated?
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think recognizing the difference between like freedom and liberation
Mhm.
is going to be important because I know that my parents were like, well, you know, you have so much more than I had. And it's like, yeah, and yet certain stuff I'm still doing that you did.
Yeah.
Like, or I'm still putting up with certain stuff, you
Mhm.
know, or, you know, shutting down certain stuff within myself that you have done. Like, and that's, you know, we want the next generation to be better than us. That means that we got to do different stuff, right? We
Mhm.
can't just like do the same thing. And so I think there's a whole discussion around just like, I think parenting and what does it mean to nurture. And I mean, y'all, I have seen you with your kids, Michelle. They seem to adore you in my eyes. So I think you are doing a beautiful job. You know, so I'm sure you were being hard on yourself, but I think they know you, and that's a beautiful thing too.
I appreciate that.
Anybody else before we kind of start to wrap things up about what are your goals? What's a big goal for you in 2024? What do you want to work on in 2024?
Oh, so the things that you need to forgive yourself for, you know, this, you know, this, Soren, I think I'm pronouncing the name right, Kierkegaard quote,
Mm,
life is meant, no, life can only be understood. Oh my God, can only be understood by looking backward, but it must be lived
forward.
forward. And you know, what I would forgive myself for is just the journey. Just wishing that I mean, there's so much I wish I would have known then when I was living life forward that I know now in looking at life backward, right? And I can choose to say, oh my God, if only I knew, I would have made different choices.
Mhm.
Or I can choose to just give that younger self a measure of grace and concentrate on where I am and how happy I am to be here. Because this is such a beautiful time, right? And so what I would want to leave behind is oh my gosh, if I had only known then what I know now. I don't want to say that. I would rather say, I'm just so glad that I am here now.
That you made it, because
Yeah, because there was some question, but here I am. Here I am.
and also that it's like you wouldn't be who you were without those experiences.
It's
I often think
so
about
true.
like, had I done this earlier, I was like, but like had I done my master's program, I think earlier in life, I wouldn't have had, I think, the amount of perspective that I have now. Like,
Mhm.
there's a reason why, like, I was able to start the program when I was, and I'm finishing when I'm supposed to. It's like that I wouldn't have had that perspective at all. Like, and so that's like I said, the gift and the curse. It's like we want to have the information, but you live the life to get the information. Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
gotta do
that's
it.
one of those. That's one of those. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. Quotes. You
Yeah.
know, you got to do the one to get to the
Yep.
other. If that is your tradition, whatever heaven is to
That's what it's
you,
gonna
or
be.
whatever the afterlife is to you. So yeah, it is the journey and the learning along the way, and that is why, in my opinion, we are here to learn and to journey and grow, and spending time on oh, if I only knew this, I wish I had done that. It's such wasted energy, and yet we all fall into it. So I am, continuing my journey to leave those things behind.
All right. Yeah. So is this the Last of Us? What is maybe a word or a saying you're taking into 2024 or 2024? Like, I know for me, I know I talked about taking more risk. But I think it's gonna be like, failing forward. I think I've done that before, but I truly mean this, like failing forward in 2024. Like testing stuff out, taking risk, and then being like, okay, well, that didn't work out. What's the next step? What have I learned from this? And how am I gonna go forward? So that's gonna be mine. Anybody else?
I'm trying to figure out how to put this into like a word or a phrase, but
It doesn't have to be a word or a phrase. You can.
okay. I think for me, I think as someone who's raised as a Christian and having a father as a pastor, there's this constant what's the word? Undoing of things for me. And I think for me, just wanting to be closer to my ancestors. And I think for me that goes against some of the things I was taught.
Yeah.
And just continuing to dismantle that, especially the women that I am descended from. I just want to grow closer to them in this year coming up. And that's a goal for me.
Love it.
A friend of mine was talking a couple of weeks ago about the idea of liminal spaces, sort of these in-between spaces, and this idea of what it means to live in the not yet. And that really resonated to me in sort of in my personal life and in my work life, of what it means to sort of live in this space where you're not there, you're not at this place that you want to be yet. And so you can't quite firmly place your feet on the ground and say, this is the place. But how do you sort of keep yourself grounded in that liminal space. And so that's what I want to hold on to, is this idea of liminality.
That's beautiful.
That
Wow.
that is beautiful. You know, I love this, and multiple times a day, I consciously remember this quote, and it is a Rumi quote. It is, wear gratitude like a cloak, and it will feed every corner of your life. And so it is the gratitude and the absolute joy that I am walking into 2024 with, and hope to sustain and expand those things there in that new year.
All right. I'm gonna have Rebecca put up this last one for 18, slide 18, from the wonderful Gwendolyn Brooks. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond. As we're kind of closing out, I just want to let folks know that, we were talking about winter before we kind of started recording, just, kind of the pre-meeting, and how this time period is like, like you're kind of like a bear, like you just want to go to sleep. And, so I think that we have to remember but the winter is a time for slowing down. It's about autumn is kind of like a death, and it's like the kind of slowing down, the kind of, going inward. And winter always makes me think of family and community. And so knowing that you have people, around you, and that that can be found family or blood, whoever it may be, but that doing this work, being who we are, we get to be each other's harvest, and we get to be each other's business. And so that means remembering during this time period that you have people around you who want to show up, who are trying, who are failing forward, who are figuring stuff out, but that you have people, and that, we have to be each other's business here. And by doing that, you got to grow, but you got to honor your growth. You got to honor your trip ups, and you got to honor the things that you have done well. And I hope that this event, or these questions, allow you to, maybe ask more questions and do some more reflection and deeper understanding of yourself, and to pass that on to the people who are around you, to ask them these questions. I think it can be a way of bonding, and a way of, I think, keeping each other accountable. So I thank you all for spending your wonderful Wednesday with myself and some other BRJA folks. I feel like I'm very much like, what is it, the quiet fire? Like, I feel like one of those radio hosts. That's what it feels like. And I know we are currently like getting together our 2024 setup. So make sure you're checking out all of our socials and our website and whatnot for our 2024 lineup. But we hope to see you January 13th, Saturday. It's going to be a Saturday at 11 a.m. And we'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has been wonderful, and I just adore the questions, Julia. Lots of
Yay.
reflection and thought. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. It was a really great idea. I'm glad I was able to kind of think through some stuff. It's